Alright, let's start. So welcome to Brushstrokes and Battlegrounds. This is kind of our face reveal. Uh, Everett's not in this video, of course, but he'll be in future videos. I just wanted to do a painting tutorial to start off. So, painting. I will show some reference photos up on screen just right here of what we're painting. So I say we get right into it. So, as you saw in the title of the video, today we're going to be painting 3 Soviet tanks. So the T-80, this is an awesome model, Team Yankee. There you go. Of course, you'll see it later more. The T-64, I don't like this model as much. I'm not very excited to paint this one. And then the BMP. I don't know which BMP. I should have probably looked that up. But, yeah. So today we're doing winter camo because Everett said that he wants to paint his West Germans winter camo. So, I guess I'm doing mine winter camo. So, yeah, let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start off with the T-80. I got some kitchen paper and my cup full of water, and we're ready to paint this guy. So for brushes, I'm using 2 size 1 detailer brushes, and then a size 6 flat head brush, and then just a crappy dollar store brush for mixing paints. And then the big one's also for mixing paints. I'm also using some packaging foam for stippling. For paints, we got Vallejo Smoke. Any white paint will work. I'm just using Game Colors Dead White. Then we got any black paint would work as well, just Game Colors black, and then we got any gunmetal or silver for stippling. And then I am using Vallejo's white surface primer just because it's runny and I like its texture. So I'm going to add a couple of drops of dead white to that white primer just to get it to a nice consistency that I can just put all over the tank and just get a nice even consistency. So there's no need to be careful. It is a winter camo that we're doing, so just slapping all the white all over just anywhere, really. If you get some on the tracks, it's okay. I got some on the tracks. I'm going to paint over them with brown. But yeah, you'll probably need 2 to 3 coats just because it's white over green. Because of that surface primer, that paint will seep into all the cracks and get all the details. So there's no need to thin it down anymore. Remember to get the turret. I almost forgot the turret. I'm just using a paint pot as a little holder so that I can paint the turret easier. And that's what it should look like after the first coat. I did a second coat off camera, and you can see how it's just that nice solid white, and how all the white gets into the cracks and crevices. If you wanted to do another coat, that's totally fine. But right now, I'm going to start mixing up the gray to fill in the little details. So I just mixed some of that surface primer with a black paint. If you just add some water to a black and white paint, that works just as well. Just anything that kind of gets that gray. You could also just buy a gray paint from companies like Vallejo or Game Color. And yeah, you can just start to fill out those details. So as you can see on the reference photo, I'm going to pick out some gray details on the places that I'm highlighting with my brush right now. So places like the oblique armor, and just little spots that I think would be good for some gray. So I grab my gray paint. It's pretty light, and I'm just going to start filling in those with a little detail brush. You can use any size brush. Just remember that you're doing nice gray details. So you might want to keep it small and simple. So as I'm filling in those details, I just have to remember to keep my brush strokes nice and light, or else I'll begin to spit the paint with the brush, and then the paint will go all over the model. As you can see, I'm just using the garbage bag that I put on top of my table to mix the paint. But you could always use a wet palette or a dry palette or anything, paper plate, just anything to keep your paint. I just like the garbage bag because it's nice and simple, and it gives me like a big space where I can spread my paint out. Just make sure not to leave your model inside the paint. I've done that a couple of times. It really messes with you, but yeah, right now I'm just filling in those details. I moved to the body of the tank to do the front section where there's a little bit of that plastic armor. And yeah, now I'm just doing the sides. Just pick out any details with gray that you'd want. On the actual Soviet tanks, they don't always have gray. They just have it on the armor to give it a little bit of contrast. And later I'll do some camouflage stripes. So right now I'm just doing the front and backs of the tank. I chose to pick out little gray spots on the barrels just because I thought it looked cool. And if you need to do a second coat of gray, that's totally fine. Just make sure that it's thin enough that it doesn't look plasticky and dries weirdly. So now I'm starting to do some camouflage patterns. You can always look up camouflage patterns on the internet or wherever. But right now I'm just doing some geometric shapes, kind of like you see in the reference photo. So I'm doing these with a slightly darker gray. There's some that do them just with black and gray. You could do 3 or 4 colors, just whatever suits you. So there's and there's a couple things that I picked out on the turret, but it doesn't have to be noticeable. So now we're going to move on to painting the tracks. I grabbed some khaki gray, but any light brown would work. We're just trying to make a muddy, rusty color that we can put on the tracks to make them look worn and torn. So I grab Vallejo Smoke and I add that to the khaki gray. Any dark brown will work. Again, we just want to get that nice, rusty brown color that we can smack all over the tracks and just make them look worn and torn. I end up adding a little bit of red. Yep, red right there to the mixture. That's a little bit too much red, but if you add some more brown, it'll start to look nice and rusty. That's what we want to get. So I just use my nice wide brush to pick out the tracks, and then I switch to a thinner brush to pick out the inside of the tracks. Never forget the inside of the tracks. It always looks good. I will keep the road wheels white though. Just kind of goes with the camouflage. And as one of our final things, we're going to take a piece of that packing foam, and we're going to heavily dilute some gunmetal gray, silver, whatever paint you want to use. I'm just using gunmetal because it's slightly darker than silver, but you could also add some black paint to a silver. And I'm just going to dab that in the paint and then wipe it off in some kitchen towel. And then I'm just going to use that, and I'm going to go along the road wheels of the tank. Sorry, I kind of messed up the camera there. But that just helps it look a little like dinged up and a little worn. You can also do the front of the tank. I did the front of the tank slightly. Maybe places where trees or bullets have rubbed the paint off, just to kind of add detail. So next, I'm going to grab a snow mixture, and I'm going to smack that all around the tank, but focusing mostly on the treads. If this video does well, I'll make a separate video on how to make this snow mixture, but it's pretty easy. You can look it up on other YouTube channels. It's just Mod Podge, baking soda, and some white paint. So I'm just going to smack that on the tracks to make them look like they've got snow in them. Feel free to use your hands. I thought I could use the brush, but it's better if you use your hands. Just make sure to get that snow all up in the road wheels and in the treads to make it look like the tank's been running on snow. You can also decorate the top of the tank with snow to make it look like it's either frosted over or that it's been snowed on. And that's about it for the T-80, so we're going to move on to the T-64. So I grabbed some blue tack or sticky tack or whatever you call it, and for the camouflage that I'm going for, reference up on screen, it's got a really old, worn out white paint, like a white camouflage. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to emulate that by putting some blue tack or sticky tack, however you call it, all over the tank so that we mask it off, so when we cover it in that white paint, that there's some green parts to show through. You could also paint green stripes, but I feel like this works better to kind of show a worn out white paint. So I'm going to mix a little bit of bone white into my white primer, because that just adds a little bit of muddy and grittiness to the white paint. So this time I am actually going to be pretty careful not to pick out the treads and the road wheels, because what a lot of T-64 crews did is they would just slap this white paint on very generously to try and get that white camo, because the T-64 is a much older tank and they didn't have production painting like the T-80 did because it was a couple of years older. So the crews were usually in charge of painting the tanks. That's still a case nowadays, but it was much more common back then. The paint would have also worn out. That's why I'm using a very old kind of off-white. Any off-white will do. I'm just using Game Color's Bone White because it's one of my favorite off-white paints. So I'm just going to smack that all over the tank, trying to avoid the road wheels and the treads. And That's what it looks like after 2 coats. You will want to do 2 coats for this one, especially if you thin it down with some water or some paint thinner. And then I do the same thing again for the treads. Just a little bit of khaki gray. Again, any brown paint will work. And then smoke. And then some red paint as well. Again, try to be careful to not pick out the road wheels with this paint. And if you do, you can cover it in some similar green paint. But I just wanted to keep the road wheels bare so they look kind of more like the original tank color. So just leave that to dry. And yeah, once it's completely dry, don't do it before it's dried because you'll get white and brown paint all over your snow. Just go pretty heavy with that snow up in the treads because this is a big tank and going through snow, it's gonna collect a lot. So now I start to remove that sticky tack, and you can see those nice green lines. And to kind of create a sort of camouflage. So that's what it looks like, all done with. Yeah, sweet, that's the T-64. Okay, moving on to the BMP. So I looked it up, and this is the BMP-3 model that Team Yankee makes. And because the BMP is a troop carrier, I am going to cut out some pieces from some other kits, like a Stewart and a Sherman kit. And I'm going to add it to the BMP to make it look like it's lived in. And then I'm going to use some gauze as netting, just to cover the equipment on the back of the BMP. So I just glued that on, and I used a Sherman barrel as an antenna. And I'm going to use some Camo olive green, and I'm going to heavily dilute that, and I'm going to use that as the base coat. So just make sure you slap that all on there, get the road wheels, try to avoid the tracks. I'm not going to paint the tracks any brown color because I like the way that they are. Yeah, just smack that on all over the tank. You can do 2 coats. I think I only did 1. And if you're using yellow parts like I do from that Sherman kit, make sure to get those. Make sure to cover them. I think a little bit of paint smeared off this antenna, but that's all right. And while I wait for that first coat to dry, I'm going to paint the gauze with the same color so that it matches the BMP. So after that's dried, you can make some white details. There's lots of different details that you can do, but BMPs usually don't have winter camos. Sometimes the crews will just glue newspapers to the outside of the BMP to make it kind of blend in with the snow color. But I just picked out some white details on this BMP, and I think it looks pretty good. The reason why I painted the cannon on the BMP is lots of teams will do that to make the cannon look smaller and make them less of a threat. As I said, I didn't paint the treads because I think the green looks browny enough, and we're just going to cover it in snow anyways. So here I'm just putting dots of super glue near that equipment on the back so I can glue this piece of gauze, to the back so it kind of looks like it's being held on there. So now I'm just going to use that snow paste in the treads and on top of the BMP to make it look like it's been snowed on. And that's the model. Roll the montage. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like and comment below what types of tanks and camos you want to see next. That's all from me. Peace out.